On a rainy Monday, March 4th, 1929, Herbert Hoover confidently took the presidential oath. There were few black clouds on the economic horizon, but the decade of decadence would die on Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. Wall Street became a wailing wall as gloom and doom replaced the boom. 650 banks failed in 1929. 1,300 failed the following year. In 1930, 40 million were jobless. By 1932, 11 million were unemployed, and families sank deeper into the pit of poverty. In the 1936 presidential election, a new leader would emerge, a leader who promised Americans a new deal. Franklin Delano Roosevelt promised hope. As he swept into office, black blizzards swept over America's breadbasket, blowing in the dirty 30s. To lead America through the dust and depression, Roosevelt would need to heal the man and heal the land. On January 30th, 1882, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born on the family's 900-acre Hyde Park estate, Springwood. High above the Hudson, Roosevelt wandered the woods where his love of the land was cultivated. He grew up fancying himself a tree farmer. Roosevelt would later remark, "At the age of 7, Hyde Park was the center of the world for me." In 1896, FDR left for Groton, an elite private school. Roosevelt entered Harvard in 1900, passed his bar exam in 1907, and at the age of 28, entered politics. In 1910, FDR, now a New York State Senator, headed the Senate Forest Fish and Game Committee and emerged as a leader in conservation. In 1928, the tree farmer, campaigning on conservation, ran for governor of New York.
And of course, I'm a tremendous enthusiast on planting idle land and vacant acres, because with my own eyes I have seen these trees growing. Some of them that I put in 20 years ago are almost as high as a house at the present time.
Governor Roosevelt promptly put men to work planting trees for his state forest program. As president, he would lead men in a similar national program. When Roosevelt was elected president in 1932, America was plagued by both economic and environmental catastrophes.
I remember as a child looking up and watching Kansas go by. I also remember fires, floods, drought. We were in a sad condition environmentally. The word environmental wasn't there at the time, basically, but the situation was, and it was a critical situation. On his own farm there in Hyde Park, he saw the erosion. He saw the depletion of the forest. I was very well aware that in his entire state, the same thing is going on.
Roosevelt, backed by Congress, passed a New Deal program putting young men to work in the Civilian Conservation Corps.
And in creating this Civilian Conservation Corps, we are killing two birds with one stone. We are clearly enhancing the value of our natural resources, and at the same time we are relieving an appreciable amount of actual distress. And we are conserving not only our natural resources, but also our human resources.
By the summer of 1933, 250,000 men were in the CCC. Roosevelt, a savvy politician, used the CCC politically, placing camps in districts that supported him and withholding camps from his enemies, such as Huey Long of Louisiana. Camps were valued because they primed the pump of local economies with $5,000 to $7,000 a month. Monthly wages were $5 for enrollees, $25 for their families, and 3 square meals a day. Men received an Army surplus uniform and a shovel. Roosevelt qualmed unionist fears that the $1-a-day wage would become accepted by employers by putting national labor leader Robert Fechner in command of the CCC. The Department of Labor recruited men ages 18 through 25. World War I veterans were given preference. Army officers ran the camps, and the National Park Service directed the conservation projects. Roosevelt planted the seeds for what would be known as FDR's Tree Army.
The Civilian Conservation Corps had the Army style. You know, you had reveille, answer, roll call, and then we'd go back to the barracks. A little bit, breakfast would be ready.
The food was wholesome, the pay was low, and the work was hard.
We were hard-working boys. By 4 o'clock, you're back to the barracks. 6 o'clock, it's chow time, and we were always ready to eat more.
The remainder of the day could be spent in vocational classes, such as mechanics, welding, or typing. Roosevelt's University in the Woods awarded proficiency certificates to those who completed their classes. Those who could not read could be found in literacy classes. The 9-year life of the CCC left a legacy of over 40,000 illiterate men learning to read and write. In 1934, Roosevelt's Tree Army became soil soldiers. Between 1934 and 1942, the Soil Conservation Service was in charge of 500 CCC camps. Their primary purpose was erosion control. FDR sent his Johnny apple seeds to the southeast to plant kudzu, a Japanese perennial vine that holds and fixes nitrogen in the soil. During the Dust Bowl, the CCC taught farmers to terrace the land and plant tree lines across the prairies of the Midwest as windbreaks. The Great Plains Shelter Belt stretches 186,000 miles from North Dakota to the Texas Panhandle and has the legacy of being the largest conservation project in American history.
National parks are not built. God did that in the beginning. So work in them is directed at the preservation of their splendid features.
In the late 1930s, FDR sent his Tree Army to build public parks, free for all to enjoy. Along the Tennessee-North Carolina border lies the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the largest park built by the CCC.
The National Park Service has set up long-range plans for the preservation and enjoyment of the parks. And the coming of the Conservation Corps immediately presented the service with a strong, young force to put these plans into action.
The conservation plans included hiking trails, recreational lakes, and rustic buildings and bridges. The CCC's work in the park has earned a designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a lasting legacy. Great Smoky Mountains National Park is only one of more than 800 parks that the CCC built in its 9 years of operation. Despite all the good the CCC did, they also did some bad. In the 1930s, ecology was in its infancy.
The CCC was put to work draining swamps to control mosquitoes. It was part of an ecosystem that, once we drained them, was destroyed.
The 73 million kudzu seedlings planted in the South have now overthrown cotton as king. A dangerous invasive species, once planted, spreads unchecked. The building of trails and roads in national forests drew criticism from wilderness and conservation groups. The shelter belts were planted along property lines. When the cash stopped, so did the cultivation. Today, skeletons of trees line the roads of the Great Plains. As you travel along America's highways and byways, reflect on the legacy of the boys of the CCC and their champion, Roosevelt. Today, millions of Americans who swim, boat, camp, and hike in parks across the nation still enjoy Roosevelt's legacy. Under Roosevelt's leadership, the Tree Army distributed more than $2.4 billion in federal funds to employ jobless young men.
It took tens of thousands of young juvenile delinquents off the streets. This had a profound effect on communities. The crime rate in Chicago declined by 50%. I've met hundreds of these guys, and they told me they looked up to him like a father. They loved him. And they became lifelong Democrats because of that. 10% of the population was being supported and helped by the CCC. That's a huge social impact.
Before FDR sent Americans to fight fascism, he scattered more than 2.5 million young Americans like seeds and told them to plant trees, more than 3 billion of them.
When the boys were building these parks, they recognized that they were building them for 5 generations down the line, that these would be legacies for Americans all the way down the line. They were building things for legacy.
George DeMar, who served in the CCC, recalled, "We were under military discipline. When World War II came, we made good soldiers." The CCC had earned the title of the poor man's West Point. The beginning of World War II signaled the end of the CCC. The effects of service in the CCC were felt for years. Businesses preferred hiring a CCC man, and the reason was simple. Anyone who had been in the CCC would know what a full day's work meant. The legacy of Roosevelt and the CCC continues today with the Corps Network, a conservation program with chapters in all 50 states. Just as its predecessor, the Corps Network allows youth to work outdoors while receiving an education.
It's outdoors, I work with plants, I work with animals, and I work with the environment, and I can get my high school diploma and a scholarship.
FDR's words still resonate today. More important than the material gains will be the moral and spiritual value of such work. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps did leave a lasting legacy on both the man and the land.